Do you have somebody in your life who's an avoidant attachment style and find yourself wondering why they constantly need space? Well, it may not be for the reasons you actually think. And in today's video, we're going to uncover exactly the reasons for what they truly need when they're asking or taking space in relationships. And we'll talk about the different psychological underpinnings of why this matters to an avoidant so much. And if you stick around to the very end, I'll actually take you through three powerful change makers in relationships that will help an avoidant feel more comfortable in your presence so they don't have to take space so frequently. So, if you're new here, my name is Thais. I'm the founder of the Personal Development School and ran a very busy client based practice for the better part of a decade prior to launching PDS, which has many, many online courses for personal development, specifically for attachment styles. So, actually, we'll share this sort of set of steps here so you can see these different dynamics. And again, we'll fill in these A, B, and C towards the end. But I think something that's really important to realize is that for an avoidant attachment style, space equals safety, soothing, and a sense of control. And this is because, as an avoidant attachment style, what often happened with avoidant attachment styles in their own childhood and upbringing is they often felt this sense of their needs not being met emotionally. And so, when they did have emotional needs or they were feeling vulnerable in some form, what ended up taking place is they felt like they had to withdraw in order to soothe inwardly in some form. Now, I would even make the argument that when dismissive avoidants are self soothing, they're not actually great self soothers. They're just good at numbing, but it's something they do on their own or by themselves, which I guess could technically put you in this category of soothing, even though it's more like self numbing. But an avoidant doesn't feel comfortable showing their emotions with somebody else, especially in the early stages, nor do they feel comfortable soothing through the numbing activities they may use while in the presence and company of others. So, when they need space, really what they're trying to do is re regulate their bandwidth emotionally. And they're trying to sort of gain this sense of control and safety from being able to do so. And it's not something they feel emotionally safe doing around others. Now, obviously, the opposite exists. If there's a lack of space in a relationship dynamic, an avoidant tends to perceive this lack of space as a lack of control, a lack of safety, and a lack of soothing. The underpinning reasons for why this actually exists, and it's super important to understand about the dismissive avoidant attachment style, is that they do not know how to co regulate. So, if you look at the history of what tends to form a dismissive avoidant attachment style, you'll see that generally it's when there's a certain degree of um, emotional repression in a dismissive avoidance childhood because the caregivers are emotionally unavailable. So either the caregivers are not emotionally present or present when the child expresses their emotions. They tend to maybe be a little bit cold, standoffish, withdrawn. They may not even realize when their child is feeling emotionally dysregulated because they're busy, preoccupied, or kind of withdrawn in their own programming, in their own attachment style. And as a result of this, the child doesn't learn to co regulate. Now, if you're like, what does co regulation mean? It's actually a really meaningful concept for all relationships, and in particular for the dismissive avoidant. And the American Psychological Association defines co regulation, you'll see right here, as a continuous unfolding of individual action that is susceptible to being continuously modified by the changing actions of the partner. And this also exists between parent child relationships. So, what this actually means, and I'll just give you a tangible example, is let's say that we have two people. Let's pretend it's myself and my husband for argument's sake. And let's say that I see my husband come home and I see that he's off, right? In the moment that he comes home, I'm attuned to him enough to notice if he's not behaving in a way that he normally behaves, if he seems sad, if his body language is off, if he seems kind of down. And because I am emotionally available and attuned to him, I would actually notice that he's feeling this way. And as a result, what I would do is get up from what I'm doing and I would check in. I would say, "How are you?" Try to talk to see if he needed to discuss or share anything, maybe give him a hug. And what I would be doing is changing my behavior to help him re regulate his state. And In turn, co-regulation is a two-way street. So if roles were reversed and I was the one that came home and felt like that, he would be attuned and be able to do something to try to express a soothing behavior or express attunement and care towards me in the relationship. This is generally what two securely attached people do for each other, but it is not mutually exclusive, right? So what I mean by that is it's not that we only ever soothe for each other and we don't know how to soothe ourselves. In an interdependent, securely attached relationship, you have access to both, right? So I have the ability to attune and express a self soothing behavior towards my husband, but I also know that he has the ability to soothe himself and vice versa, right? So that's what you'd see in a normal, secure relationship dynamic. When there's one person that's avoidant, right, in a two-person dynamic, the avoidant blocks co-regulation from existing. They've never had that connection really modeled to them in their growing up or in their upbringing. And so they usually don't know that they can even rely on someone if they're feeling off, or not 100%, or they're feeling tired. So instead, whenever they're not feeling sort of at this peak of 100% to show up, they will withdraw to be able to soothe because that's their way of re-regulating because they don't know how to co-regulate. And an example of this could be that maybe you're just starting to get to know somebody who's avoidant and maybe you're dating, and if they were becoming more secure or working on this, they might say, "Hey, I've had a really long week. I'm exhausted. Can we just stay in tonight and watch a movie?" And that would be themselves, opening enough to communicate their needs so that that need could be met, which would then have a soothing impact on their state. But instead, what you'll often see is because dismissive avoidants don't even realize they can do that, they just feel like it's all or nothing. So they'll go, "Hey, I can't come tonight, to our date. I've had a long week," and they'll kind of cancel altogether because they're not making room to be able to communicate in a two-way format so that co-regulation can occur. So, what does this all mean? Well, when the avoidant begins to co regulate, they will need less space when a few crucial things happen. Okay. And it doesn't mean that this is your responsibility as the partner of an avoidant, but it means that you can leverage more of these things and make sure that you're intentional about bringing them more often into your relationship because it will make space for a dismissive avoidant to co regulate. So, in other words, what I'm about to go through here is that I'm going to tell you three things that help a dismissive avoidant to learn to co regulate so that they can soothe through you, not just on their own, and thus need less space in their relationship. These are actually like rite of passage features to an avoidant becoming more secure when they feel these things and are influenced by these things in a relational dynamic overall. Number one, a sense of acceptance. Okay. When a dismissive avoidant feels acceptance, they tend to lower their guard. They tend to feel more open to sharing things. If they feel less judged by things or less shamed by things or less criticized by things, they tend to feel more emotionally safe. And so they'll tend to feel like they can be more comfortable to kind of open themselves up, share things. And it's really the first foundational piece of what's going to allow for a sense of co-regulation that they can receive from somebody else. Okay. Acceptance is a huge need that a lot of avoidants have in relationships overall. Now, I'm going to give you these two other things here. I do just want to say quickly, if you want to do a much deeper dive into co-regulation, I have all webinar style courses for co-regulation as each attachment style that you can check out fully for free for a limited time. I will put the link down below. And they will tell you all about how each attachment style's patterns are with regulation, what each one needs, and how to do it with one another. Um, so if you want to do a much deeper dive into this topic, I'll put that there for you. So acceptance is huge. Empathy is also huge, which really is also the result of attunement. Okay. So the more that empathy is expressed, sometimes people won't realize that dismissive avoidants receive empathy so well because they can be quite stoic. So if you're like validating their feelings, like let's say somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I had such a long week." You're like, "Oh yeah, like I can tell you had a long week. I know you worked so hard this week. I really saw you show up for all these different things you had to do. It makes sense that you're tired." If you can validate what their feelings are, what their experience is, it goes a long way. Now, I will say that how a DA receives validation of feelings is slightly different than how a fearful avoidant would, for example. So, dismissive avoidants tend to want their feelings to be validated. I'll even put this here: validate feelings more generally. Because there's a difference if somebody's really avoidant and they're working towards vulnerability between having you say something like, I see that you feel desperately sad today, versus, hey, I see that something's upsetting you. It feels less vulnerable to hear the latter, to hear, hey, it makes sense that you're upset about what happened with your boss, rather than I see that you're so sad about what happened with your boss. The intensity and specificity of emotions of so and sad can feel a little confronting for someone who's not trying to confront their own emotions. But if you're saying something like, hey, I get why that conversation with your boss would be upsetting. It's a little more high level, a little more ambiguous, and it feels safe and comfortable for an avoidant to actually accept and intake the empathy being expressed from a loved one. And last but not least, you'll see that this emotional safety is a huge part of the relationship. So if there's a lot of like big fighting, roller coaster moments, highs and lows, an avoidant isn't going to really feel super safe to open and share themselves. And thus, they're going to have a harder time co regulating because if I don't feel safe to open up, then I can't co regulate. And thus, it's going to really prevent the relationship from progressing and moving forward. So, emotional safety, things like harmony and absence of volatility. These things are really meaningful for a DA to be ready to open up. So these are the things they're really looking for when they need space. They don't usually consciously know this, but it's meaningful to understand and understand the patterns and dynamics for why this exists or occurs to begin with. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you want to do a deeper dive into co-regulation, check out those courses for free for a limited time down below. And also, if you're enjoying this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to have you here. I put pretty much daily content out on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.